Hiya, folks. Welcome to our another session of Microsoft Azure Community User Group. My name is Nicholas, and I'm joined with Kevin Green.
Hey, folks. Welcome aboard. So, I think this is our 19th one now, Nick?
Yeah, I lost track. Too many. So
That's good.
Today one, which is going to be a good session, is on Azure DevOps on SQL. So if you want to send line some database with some ADO. So let's just do some housekeeping before we start.
Perfect. You bring up the housekeeping, then I'll introduce our amazing speakers for tonight.
Let me see. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let me swap the display. Yep. So a little bit about us. So I'm Nicholas Chang. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I'm senior platform engineer at Kenus. And I enjoy giving back to the community, like doing these community events.
Yeah, and I'm Kevin Green. So I'm an Azure MVP and also an Azure practice lead in Ergo in Dublin.
So code of conduct is that all members of this group should abide by this code of conduct, be friendly and welcome to everyone, be patient, be thoughtful, be respectful and inclusive, and always be open and curious. So always when you try to ask questions, to try to understand things you don't know, and try not to criticize the no. Just be polite and welcoming.
As always. Okay, I'm going to just introduce the speakers that we have. So we've got on our agenda for tonight, folks. We've got first up, we've got Björn Sundling, who's a DevOps consultant and a Microsoft MVP. And Björn is going to present a session around Azure DevOps security called the secret, less secret, and not so secret paths to Azure DevOps security. So it's going to be some really interesting topics in that presentation. Then we have Javier Villegas, and he's an IT director for a Mediterranean shipping company, and he's also a Microsoft MVP in the data platform. So if you're new to data in Azure, or if you're already familiar with data in Azure, this introduction to Azure SQL session should be something that would be of definite interest to you and to most of our viewers on this channel. So looking forward to some good content.
So our next event will be different than normal. So we're doing an in-person event in Dublin. So we're going to Dublin on the date. And we're going to do like a Microsoft Azure Community and AI Day. So it'll be a whole day of community. So it'll be great fun, amazing speakers. So come join us.
Perfect. Okay, so shall we bring in Björn and get started?
Yeah.
Hello.
Speaker.
Hello.
Hey, Björn, if you want to kick off whenever you're ready, we're looking forward to the content. And please, as we said earlier, folks, if anyone has any questions, please drop them into the chat, and Nick and myself will make sure that Björn can answer them for you.
Absolutely. Sounds like fun.
Cool. Over to you, buddy.
Just see if I can figure out how to share a screen in this program.
Nice.
Yep, that looks good. And let's do this. And hopefully...
Yeah, got it.
Yay! Perfect. Fantastic. I feel like a tech pro. Hello. Great fun to be here. Enjoying the day so far, or the evening here. It's going to be really fun to present. I'm going to talk about the secret, the less secret, and the not so secret paths to Azure DevOps security today. Now, before we get running, we could actually also call this stuff Björn finds cool in the Azure DevOps ecosystem, because that's quite literally what we're going to talk about. You know, it's just stuff that I find useful and that I tend to recommend to customers, clients, and friends, for that matter, to implement when they start their Azure DevOps journeys. A wee bit about me. My name is Björn Sundling. A lot of people call me Björn. You can find me on GitHub on the Björn moniker, Mastodon Björn. or bjompen.com, my webpage. Basically, if you find the name Bjompen somewhere, chances are fairly good you have found me there. I spend my days in Azure, doing Azure DevOps and DevOps stuff, basically helping developers getting over the hurdle, doing whatever is needed. And I'm fortunate enough to work at a company called Advania in Sweden, where I do consultancy, and I'm allowed to spend my days doing this cool stuff, which led me to the MVP path. So I'm an MVP in the developer technologies category. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, and I have a bunch of certifications and lots more cool stuff. There, I think that's just about enough of PowerPoint. So we're going to jump right into demos and looking at code. So like the demo session said, we're going to look at the secret, less secret, and not so secret paths to Azure DevOps security. But we're actually going to do it in reverse order and look at sort of the most known up until somewhat lesser known software or systems. I hope, let's see, we can zoom in a bit. There we go. Hope the size is good enough for you. If not, please yell in the chat or jump in and tell me the text is too small. So approximately half a year ago, in Azure DevOps. So yeah, like I said, we're going to look through this, but we're going to do it in reverse order. So most famous, approximately half a year ago, Microsoft released a product called GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps. And this is probably the easiest and best security step that Microsoft built into Azure DevOps in a long time. Basically, it's already included in your Azure DevOps environment. You go into your project settings or your organization settings. In your repo settings, you have the Advanced Security tab. Enabling this switch is everything you need to do. Now, before you just jump in and do this, I must say that this costs money. This is the only thing that we're going to look at today that has a steady billing. It costs you $49 per active committer per repo, or per active committer to repos. But it will warn you and tell you, okay, this is how much you are expected to pay if you enable this. Now, when you enable this, lots and lots of cool stuff immediately start happening. So right away, when you enable this setting on the repo, Azure DevOps will start looking through your code, your repos, on all the repos where this is enabled, and see if anywhere in any branch, in any commit, is there a secret somewhere that is leaked. Have you ever committed a secret of any kind? Now, there are lots of patterns that they recognize. So they know, the Azure DevOps tokens, Azure tokens of all kind, passwords. They can recognize AWS tokens, all kinds of tokens. Unfortunately, it's not exactly official how the patterns look, but they do recognize a lot of tokens. So it will right away start scanning through all your repos and all your repo history for this. And this is really good because it will warn you and tell, okay, this is a secret. It's been checked into code. Retract this password and fix it. But that's not everything it does, because one thing that sets GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps out amongst the competitors, there are other software that can scan for passwords. The thing that separates this is that they also include push protection. That is, I just copied number of passwords. Believe me, they are there. And also, trust me, they are already retracted. All of these are. But the push protection setting that is included in this means that if I were to commit code into my repo, and if I try to push this, oh, wait, there we go. Azure DevOps will actually block the remote push. So not only will it say, okay, there's a password in your code somewhere, it will refuse to accept this code. And this is a huge difference from basically every other similar secret scanning software that I have ever tried out. Because this means not only will your passwords not leak, they will never show up there on your Azure DevOps server in your Git history at all. This is one step left in the security pipeline, and it's absolutely brilliant. This is I cannot stress enough how much I love this feature. And this comes right away on your GitHub Advanced Security. So I cannot commit this code because it contains secrets. I have to fix it. I have to extract my secrets, set up something like a key vault or other security measure to push this code. And that's really good. So let's leave this. But that's not everything, because Advanced Security, GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps also contains a couple of tools. So let's go look at what it does. We have a vulnerability scanner. So when we set up a pipeline, let's go back a step and click this one instead. When we set up a pipeline, we can add this one. This step, this pipeline YAML step, simply says scan for any insecure dependencies in my code. Now, in this case, I have a Node package, JavaScript stuff with Node packages in my repo. So this will scan for all kind of known dependencies. And if we go look at a run, we have the Advanced Security Dependency Scan. Now, as you can see from this little list, not only does it scan Node packages, but it scans a whole lot of other dependencies, and it actually builds the entire dependency tree, and it will see, okay, look, there is a security issue in your dependency on Ludash 3.10.1, and so on. Now, this project is set up with a lot of security issues because I want them. But this will actually scan your code and see, you have security issues here. Really, really good. In this case, I have opted to actually not break my pipeline, but for customers, especially for high security customers, I always recommend set this up as a breaking feature. If you have security issues, pause, stop, fix these. And this is dependencies. So we check for all the kind of dependency issues. But this isn't all, because Azure GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps also does CodeQL. And if you are a developer who has worked with GitHub, chances are fairly big you have looked at this before. Now, CodeQL looks a bit different. You actually have to set up an initiation. This constructs a database of the languages that your code is created in. And then you build your code. And then we run the analyze step. And this analyzation step will check your built code for known security issues, such as buffer overflows or SQL injections, or do you have you written bad code? And again, if we go back and look at a run, now, like I said, I have a lot of tools in this repo. And in this case, it's actually collapsing everything. But what we can see here is that there's a lot of tests. It will load all of these tests. And once the build is done and the analyzation step is running, it will try to basically hack your code. It will see if we can run any of these injections or any of these issues in your code. Like I said, you have to tell it which language. In this case, it's a C program, and it will run all of these tests and see, hey, somewhere down here, okay, apparently I got an issue. Somewhere down here is an issue where it's I have security. Now, all of this is fantastic, and we can tell our pipeline to break and say, oh, there is an issue with your code. We can also, in Advanced Security, go into the repo dashboard. So you have an Advanced Security tab in your repos that will show you every single security issue that it has found, the state of it. Is it open? Is it fixed? What's the problem? You can even go in, let's see if we can find some, and see. Now, this is the date it was detected. This is the description of it, and let's see if I can find one that we can fix. Okay. In some cases, you also get, some cases that I can find right now, you also get a recommendation of how to fix it. That is, change this code to this code instead, or update this dependency. So the first and simplest tool, and the sort of most famous of the tools I will look at today for security in Azure DevOps, is GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps. It's absolutely brilliant. It's a game changer, especially the secret, the blocking secret push. It's magically good. The other tools, depending on what language you have. But this is just scanning for content, or like if you have your web pages or your C program or whatever, it's for developed content that it scans for things. We also have other stuff that we deploy. So we're going to go look at a somewhat less known tool that was actually the predecessor to GitHub Advanced Security. In your organization, if we go to extensions, come on, thank you. In the extensions marketplace, you can click Browse Marketplace and it will show up, and you can click and search around here. In this marketplace, you have Microsoft Security DevOps. Now, this tool, if you go to the marketplace, is absolutely free to install. Just install it, click here, and select it to your Azure DevOps organization. Most often and absolutely recommended when you install this is to also install the Sarif SAST scans tab. I will get to why in a short while, but these two I highly recommend installing. They are open source, so you can go to the repo and look what they actually do. And here we can see all the tools included in MSDO. So we have, above all, the things I like is the infrastructure as code scanning tools, because I do a lot of Azure work. When I deploy ARM templates or Bicep templates, my two favorite languages, I can add this as a free step to my pipeline, and it will start scanning and making sure everything works. So how does it look? Well, let's go back to our repos again. I have here a lot of different codes, a lot of different languages. We have some Bicep, we have some Cassandra stuff, we have some Python stuff, we have a Docker file, and I also included one of my favorite nifty little tools called LiceCap. It's a screen capture to GIF software. I love it, but it's quite old and it contains security issues. Brilliant for testing. And we also have a pipeline. Now this pipeline, it may look simple, but the MSDO pipeline requires a tad more configuration. By default, you only have to add this one, the task Microsoft Security DevOps at 1, because that's the latest one. You can also give it a display name like everything else, but it does require some .NET versions. Actually, I discovered when I ran this a couple of days ago that I have actually missed one. I need to install one more .NET version. So if you see an error in the pipeline, it's because I'm a bad person. But if you add this Security DevOps to your pipeline, it will right away start scanning. Let's go to it. For all kinds of issues. Like I showed you in the repo, there's a number of different tools that it will use. By default, it will add every single one of these and try to run them. A couple of these, well, I don't really have use for them. So there are more configurations that you can do. It's all documented on the GitHub page. I will absolutely post it to you, and you are free to share it in your whatever communication channels you have. But the configuration on this can be...
sorry, can you zoom in a little bit?
Yep, there we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, the configuration on this can be a bit quirky. It can require a lot of discussion. And if you are interested, I have a blog post that goes into a bit of detail on this, but I can't really go through all the details on how you configure this by default right now. What's important is that it will scan your code for whatever it can find, and it will take some time, and it will do pretty much the same as GitHub Advanced Security for DevOps. It will give you a huge log of all kinds of, oh, there we go, that's the error that I discovered the other day. I'm missing a .NET runtime somewhere. And it will output a Serif file that says, okay, these issues were found in your code. We have a completion log, and we can see what actually is wrong here. But what's actually more interesting, like I showed you, the Serif extension, it will also give you this. Come on, thank you. Here we go. So the Serif extension will give you a scans tool. It's actually not just for MSDO, it's for all kinds of scanning tools. But it will give you all of this in a sort of a bit more nice layout. It is sorted based on tool. So we have Chekhov, we have Template Analyzer, we have BinSkim. BinSkim is the tool that scans exe files. Like I said, I have included the one LiceCap. And it will give you all the results. It will allow you to link through the file, apparently, but that was not what I was supposed to show you. I was going to go here. So it will also include links to the actual test, what it means, what's the issue, what enable the ESLR, what is the issue we have in our hands right now. And in some cases also here, let's see if we can find one. Oh, come on. ERC file scanner. Oh, is it in this one? Service, there, that one. In this one, we can, okay, this is the actual, this is the a bicep blob template that I have. And for some reason, I can't find the right place to click right now. There we go. Thank you. It will also show that, okay, here's the properties. I don't know if you saw it, but it actually highlighted it in red a couple of seconds. And it will say, this is the one you need to fix this issue. So it will give you all of these information in a nice tab on your scans. But this is also connected to the pipeline run you're currently in. It's really, really good, really, really useful, but it's tied to one run and it's kind of easy to miss. Now, again, with this tool, like I said, with the GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps, we can add this, there we go, and say, if there is an issue with my code, break. That means stop the pipeline. Do not allow me to push anything with issues to production, which of course I recommend, but in this case, it's actually not always doable unless you dig into, like I said, the configuration here can be quite hard. But it works, and at least getting a good overview of your security measures is not that hard. You can get all of these issues gathered, and you can see what kind of problems do I have with my code. Now, not all of us enjoy spending our days in Azure DevOps. And especially, we probably may not always want to let our manager guy, into our Azure DevOps organization. In some cases, we just want reports. We just want to see, what is the issues. We don't care about where in the code it is or so on. So one really, really good thing about both GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps and MSDO is that they both tie in really nice to Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Now, this is the Azure service in Microsoft Defender. In Microsoft Defender, you have what used to be called as Microsoft Defender for DevOps and now called DevOps Security. And you can add an environment here and say, get data from my Azure DevOps organization. This will set up a connector to your Azure DevOps, and it will immediately start gathering all these MSDO and GitHub Advanced Security reports. And you can see that, okay, you know what, in this project, in this organization, in this project, I have yay many red, yay many yellow, and yay many oranges. We can even dig into them a bit and see, you know, in the Gasto repo, well, these are the actual issues we have found so far. So no details, just sort of what a nice overview that we can dig around in. We can also do stuff like add workbooks to this. So we can say, take action when you find an issue. For example, we have the pull request status. Now this is off on my repos, basically because it's my own organization, it's my demo organization. But we can say that, you know, force enable of pull requests. So you are not allowed to have a repo that doesn't allow that doesn't require pull requests to your code. And these are small but really, really simple steps to improve your baseline security, or at least, if not enforcing security, be aware of it. Because I confess, I don't think I've ever been to a customer with zero security issues. There are always dependencies that we can't fix because the dependencies of the dependencies are not fixed yet, or there are stuff that doesn't matter. You know, sure, you may have a buffer overflow, but the one edge case, it's virtually impossible, so it's not worth time to fix it. But instead of having this as an unknown issue, using these tools, we can actually have it as a known one. So instead of, we can take more informed decisions instead of just hoping that we are secure. So the most famous one I wanted to mention, GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps. Somewhat less famous and somewhat less known security tool, MSDO. I highly recommend them both, and especially if you work with Azure and infrastructure in Azure, I can't recommend them enough, especially for the amazing price of just about nothing. Now, because I have some time left before I have to leave, I am going to mention my third one, and that is actually not a security tool at all. Like I said, we could just as well have called this session Stuff Björn Finds Cool in Azure DevOps. But it is a tool that I recommend our customers to use because of security. So one of the main issues we have when we deploy stuff into our environments is keeping it safe. Like one of the most common attacks is supply chain attacks, one of the most common ways to take over your environment. And you do not want to leave stuff open when you don't have to. Previously, we had pipelines that was set up using stuff like service connections. So you could use the Azure deployment tools or the Azure deployment steps, and you set up a service connection and you used it and you deployed to your Azure environment. Now, the problem with this is that a service connection is basically a password that someone needs to take care of. You still need to manage secrets. You still need to manage everything else. So a long time, I've been saying that 99% of my work was just recommending people to set up VM scale sets. Now, a couple of weeks ago, it's actually so new, may have actually passed a month now in public preview. Microsoft released something called MDP, Managed DevOps Pools. And Managed DevOps Pools is a brand new type of resource in Azure. It's a kind of pool. I lost the word. Agent pool, thank you, that we set up and connect to our environment that combines the advantages of releasing stuff using internal runner with the advantages of the hosted runner. So it lets us do stuff like setting up scaling, setting up various different images. We can say that, host this on an Ubuntu server image, or for that matter, if my internet would just be a bit faster, this is actually the first time where we can go and say, you know what, run the Azure Pipelines agent. There we go. I now have Windows Server 2019 as an Azure Pipelines agent. That's the same agent type that the Azure Pipelines runs themselves. But this also lets us do stuff like adding a managed identity or connecting to our internal networks. I think I have one somewhere. Yep. There we go. There we go. And now, since we can use this managed DevOps tool to deploy our stuff, once we have built it, we use our scanners, we set up our make sure that we don't have any secrets in our code. We set up our build steps to include our Azure Key Vaults and run our keys from there, and so on. We make sure we don't have any dependencies, and apparently we fail to update anyhow. When we deploy stuff, instead of having to use service accounts or service connections or any other way in Azure DevOps to talk to our environments, we can actually use these managed identities that automatically controlled, that has their secrets controlled. No one has to know everything. We can set up our controls and our approval steps in Azure DevOps. And the only thing we need to do is to add this pool to our pipeline like this. And then we can do stuff like use the managed identity and do whatever deployment steps you need to do here. This way, we also save ourselves the issue of having to manage secrets. This is a huge step forward when it comes to how you actually deploy your code in your environment. Now, naturally, it does require some Azure subscription, and it comes with the cost of spinning it up and down, but the cost is actually quite minimal. I've been running this for I don't know how long, and it costs me cents per month. It's pretty darn cheap. Now, I, of course, have a run that I can show as well, but it's not that fun. It actually just says, okay, we can actually log in and run our managed identity and do our subscription stuff in here. So my last sort of recommendation when it comes to this kind of secure is to also remember to think about the hosts involved, because again, even if you do self-hosted deployments, you have to remember that everyone that can access your code can access these environments, and they can deploy stuff to whatever that service account has access to. So being able to have a pool dedicated to one project and only allowing it the access that project should have is a huge step when it comes to securing your environments and making sure that no one can deploy anything without asking for permission. Now, I am pretty much out of my half an hour of time, but I do want to show you this as well. When you do the Microsoft Security DevOps stuff, it actually injects a couple of steps into your pipeline as well. So you have the Microsoft Defender for DevOps container mapping start and the container mapping end. This is because of how the scanning works, but do not get surprised when you automatically have a couple of extra bonus steps in your pipeline doing this. They are there to actually so everything works as they should. And with that, those are my 3 favorite tools right now that can help you improve your security in your Azure DevOps pipeline. GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps, MSDO, and Managed DevOps pools. They save you from a lot of headaches when it comes to being secure. And I hope that's everyone's happy.
That was a really great presentation. I use Azure DevOps, and I was aware of some of the toolings and some of those tips, but definitely not all of them. So I'll be looking this video back. There's some really neat ones in there that I think any non-traditional developer or even a developer who is very familiar with it and comfortable with it can certainly take some tips from that. I think well done. Thank you so much. if you have a few minutes, there are some questions that I think one or two were brought up, but just read a couple of them out. So Netscape in the Wood asked, how does this compare to Veriscan?
Veriscan.
I have to say I do not know, because I don't know what Veriscan is. I would say these kind of tools are available in a million different versions. I have tried a number of them myself, and I've both commercial and non-commercial. The biggest difference I found with these tools, MSDO and GitHub Advanced Security, is in GitHub Advanced Security, the push protection for repos. That is a literal game changer, because it stops your secrets from leaking before they even get published. And the fact that they are mostly built into the software, it doesn't require if you look at a lot of these tools, the hurdle to get up and running is quite big. Both of these tools are easy to get started with, and that's sort of why I often recommend them, because at least you get something. You can, if you are specialized, if you are interested, you can do your digging and take your time to see what tool you want. This is basically just click, click, run, and you have at least a baseline somewhat higher than 0. So yeah, I hope that's a good enough answer. I don't know the difference because I don't know Veriscan, unfortunately.
Yeah. So we have another question from James Smith. Team seems to be deprecated for notification also with tenants. I'm looking to post notification with a commit to prod. Has this been pushed? I don't know. I'm not sure if this is a question.
Okay, yeah, service hooks is deprecated. I have never really used them for that matter. James, if you go back to in the video, you can see my contact. I would love to see sort of the use case and dig into it, but I have no direct answer. I have built my own integrations using basically PowerShell and some YAML for the pipelines themselves. But I see the point, and feel free to contact me, and we can.
So we got one more
here from Patrick, right? So is GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps worth the price compared to Microsoft Security DevOps?
They are different tools. They are very different beasts. So like I said, MSDO is pretty much for stuff like infrastructure as code. For Python code, it's a good scanner, but otherwise the focus is quite different. Whereas GitHub Advanced Security is for the actual contents of your code. Is it worth the price? Well, it depends. If you're a small company, it's definitely expensive. It can grow, but remember, it's per committer. So even though I commit to a million different repos in a million different projects, I'm still just me. So I just pay it once. And now I'm not 100% certain, but I read, I think it was a year ago, that the average price for intrusion is approximately $750,000. I can buy more than one license for that price. And since code injections and dependencies are the primary source of leakage, I find it to still be cheap enough. At least do it for high security repos. If you have public facing projects, if I have projects that only deploys indoors, or that doesn't ever leave the firewall, maybe it's not as high a requirement. But if you deploy your public web page and it has a login, well, it's kind of good to make sure that it works better. It's always a balance. But MSDO, I mean, they work perfect together. You can have them in the same pipeline, and you can do them together. They are different beasts. They do different things. MSDO is free, so I don't really see a reason for not.
Cool. I think I'm looking. Just Dan put a comment in. Don't think it's a question, more just a comment.
Yep.
Found that most of the Microsoft SEC DevOps tools are open source and easily added to your own build validation pipelines. Anyway.
Yep, correct. And the MSDO isn't really a Microsoft tool. It's basically Microsoft spent some time gathering them and put them together in a tool, but the tools themselves are mostly external open source tools. So it's very open. It's actually, like I said, I have a blog post digging a bit into it. And so it's somewhat well-kept secret that there are more than one tool inside it. So apart from the tools on the GitHub page, I think there are like 3 or 4 or 5 different tools more included in it that you can enable and maybe get to work. But okay, like I said, it's an open source tool. Dig into it.
Cool. I think that is all the questions and comments that have come in. Some good interaction there, Björn.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, we will leave it there. Thanks again. That was a really great presentation. And we will go over to our second speaker of the night, Javier.
Thanks.
Hi, hello. How are you, everybody? How are you doing? Nice to be here today, and thank you for the invitation.
Great to have you.
So let me share my screen. Sharing the screen. Here we go. Let me know when you see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yep, all good.
All right. So the idea for today's session is basically talk about Azure SQL. Right? Let's see what it is, what that means, and what we can accomplish with this. Right? So we will go through a few slides, and finally we will see it in action. What can we accomplish with Azure SQL? So let's get into this introduction to Azure SQL. A little bit about me. My name is Javier Villegas. I am from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I work as IT director at the Mediterranean Shipping Company, and I've been involved with SQL Server for the last 30 years. I'm Microsoft MVP in the data platform category award for the last 9 years, and I'm also Microsoft certified trainer. I'm also a former member of the Azure Data Community Advisory Council, and I define myself as a technical speaker. And I've been part of, and I am part of multiple communities, data-related communities around the world. I'm also one of the local leaders for our own community here, SQL Argentina. Right? We have our monthly meetings in person, in line as well. Right? There are in Spanish, but if you feel comfortable with Spanish, don't doubt to join us. On the left side of the screen, I leave you my contact information, email, X, LinkedIn, and my blog in case you have any doubt about this presentation that you would like to follow up later on. All right. So let's see what this Azure SQL thing is. So first of all, the marketing phrase from Microsoft for Azure SQL it's quite good actually, and it's quite accurate, right? Azure SQL is just SQL, right? SQL Server has been the leading relational data platform and relational engine for the last several years, right? So now we have this new Azure SQL, which I like to call umbrella, right? Which cover products and services related to SQL Server. All right. So nowadays we have the SQL Server on-premise product, the one that's come with the installer, with the ISO file, etc., which is SQL Server 2022. Right. So what do I have in this Azure SQL? Well, something quite similar, and in some cases exactly the same. So within Azure SQL, we have 3 main categories. Right. The first one is infrastructure as a service, and is SQL Server on Azure Virtual Machines. What is this? Well, basically, the SQL Server versions that we've been dealing with on-premise, right, or in our local virtual machines, right, but running on virtual machines created and configured within the Azure infrastructure, right? We will see which could be the benefit of having these virtual machines in Azure, and probably most of the ideas and things that we can do at the top of it, right? But Azure SQL running on virtual machines is SQL Server, right? We will see the versions and the additions and everything behind it, but on Azure Virtual Machines. Why is it called infrastructure as a service? Well, first of all, because we, as end users, we need to administer and handle the infrastructure behind the scene. What does it mean? We have to provision the virtual machine with a specific operating system, with certain settings for the networking, for the security, for the high availability, for the authentication, etc., etc., etc. So if eventually we would like to create an availability group to have geo-replicated replicas of our SQL Server, we have to do it ourselves. And we have to set up everything. We have to set up the virtual machine, the connectivity, the security, etc., etc., etc. Same as we've been doing for years on premise, right? But again, we will see some of the benefits when we see the demo, right? So as long as the infrastructure behind the scene, we also need to administer and handle it, meaning when there is a patch for either the OS or the SQL Server, we have to find out the maintenance window to be able to patch those, to apply those patches ourselves, right? So this is SQL Server running on Azure Virtual Machines, the very same SQL Server that we're using nowadays, right? These are quite easy to do the migration because, as I said, if you have a SQL Server running on premise, you just took those backups that you have, you restore it there, and you have 100% compatibility with what you have nowadays, right? Excuse me. Then you have a second category called platform as a service, right? And within platform as a service, you have two offerings. One is Azure SQL Database, and the other one is Azure SQL Managed Instance. Why this category is platform as a service or PaaS? Mainly because Microsoft provides you and handles for you all the infrastructure behind the scene in order to support SQL Server as a service in two different flavors. And we will see the differences in a minute, right? So everything that I said before for the virtual machines, right? Now we don't need to worry about. We don't need to worry about the clusters, the availability group, the patching, the networking, the configuration, anything like that. And we have everything as a service. So we will deploy the service, then we will connect to the services with either Management Studio, Azure Data Studio, our own application, whatever. But we don't worry what is behind the things supporting infrastructure for those services, right? We will see a little bit more for this point in a minute. So then you can ask me why we have two flavors. What is the difference? Well, let's start with Azure SQL Database, right? And as you can see in the slide, it's best for supporting modern cloud application. So when you deploy an Azure SQL Database, right, you will create this service. You will connect to the database from Management Studio, and you will have 100% compatibility of your code, right, of your T-SQL, by the way, from all these options, right? So you don't have to learn any new Transact SQL, T-SQL coding because it's just SQL, right, as we said before. But why this Azure SQL DB is so unique? Well, first of all, it has a unique characteristic, which is unique within all the other options within Azure SQL, which is that it doesn't support cross-database transactions. What does it mean? When you create your application, everything has to be encapsulated or created within a unique user database. Meaning that if your application has, stored procedures and tables in different user databases, and you want to join tables that are located in different user databases, you won't be able to use it. You won't be able to use Azure SQL DB, right? Because everything, views, procedure, tables, everything has to live within the same user databases, right? This is not a problem. This is just a characteristic of this specific service, Azure SQL DB, right? Super popular, super used for, again, modern cloud applications. We have a few slides later talking about how we can migrate, right, from one option to the others. We may have an existing application running within multiple user databases, and we want to migrate to Azure SQL DB. But for sure, we won't be able to do the lift and shift. We may have to re-architecture some part of the application, basically because of what I said earlier. We have to move all the objects within or under the same user database, right? So the concept and the benefit of having SQL as a service, and like I said earlier, without worrying about the infrastructure behind the thing, was so well accepted and used extensively, right? But there was something that was missing. What if I want the same power of SQL Server with all the, let's say, cross-database support and, possibility of doing a lift and shift of our SQL Server databases into an option as a service, right? With all the benefit of running SQL as a service. That is why Microsoft came with Azure SQL Managed Instance, right? Or MI, right? This is a almost 100% compatible SQL Server as a service. So we can take the databases from our on-prem SQL Server, any version mainly, and restore it to Azure SQL Managed Instance. And we have almost everything we need. We have SQL Server Agent, and other capabilities that I'll show you in a minute, right? So, and as I said, as a service, without worrying about the infrastructure behind the thing. And lately, there was a third category added into the Azure SQL portfolio, which is Azure SQL Edge, right? This is to be able to run IoT application at edge to collect, store, and process data, right? So you can run SQL Server Edge, right, on a device like this. This is a Raspberry Pi, an ARM device. So you can have your SQL Server in here. You can connect with Management Studio, right? You can deploy your user databases. Of course, you won't be running your mission-critical decision-making application on it, but for certain scenarios, as I said, for Edge, for example, capture and store and process data coming from sensors, devices, or anything at the field, at the edge, is definitely a right option, right? And as I mentioned earlier, all of this without having to learn any new language. This is just SQL. This is just Transact SQL, so you can work on it, right? So this is the brief introduction of all the component of Azure SQL. We will focus today on the first three that I mentioned: SQL Server on Virtual Machine, Managed Instance, and Azure SQL Database, right? So which are the benefits that we may have with Azure SQL, right? This is both infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. First of all, business continuity and high availability, right? Even if for infrastructure as a service, we have to take care of setting up, the cluster, etc. In platform as a service, to be able to set up high availability and disaster recovery in multiple Azure regions, it's just a matter of few clicks, right? We configure that, and in a matter of minutes, we have databases automatically synchronized across different regions, so we won't have any data loss, right? So for both highly operations availability and disaster recovery for terrible scenarios like climate situations or hurricanes or earthquakes, whatever, you also are covered with that. Automated backup, long-term backup retention, and sure replication. What is all this? Well, for all of us that we've been working with SQL Server for years, right? We know that doing backup is one of the most important things that a DBA has to deal with, right? So we have to take the backup, have our information on our data fully secure, right? And there are certain regulations that we may need to follow in order to be compliant with certain rules. For example, we need to take the backup, have certain retention. We have to have a copy of those backups on a remote location, right? Just in case we have a big problem and we cannot even access the building, right? So within Azure SQL, you have the possibility of doing all this with a few clicks, right? So you take the backup, you specify the retention within the Azure portal, and then you enable sure replication, and automatically those backups will be synchronized across multiple regions. This way, you are fully covered. And if you are applying to, for example, an ISO certification, you have the whole backup thing covered, right? Another benefit, and to me, the most important one, is the scalability, right? For any of the services, and even with the virtual machines that I present before, scalability is a big deal. Why is that? So going back to a few years ago, when we have a new application, a new deployment to come up with, we have to define our hardware, our server, how many cores, memory, disks, write level, etc. And with that, right, we're going to define it as good as we can, and then we will install the OS, SQL Server, and then we will live with that, right? Let's say that in few months our business go super well and our server got a little bit small for the work. We have CPU, high CPU utilization, those kind of things. Well, we have to try to find out the way to upgrade the CPU, upgrade the memory, put faster disk, or worst case scenario, buy another server, right? This takes times and, of course, money. Within Azure SQL and the Azure portal, as we will see in a minute, you have the possibility of scaling up, right? Anytime you want. So let's say that in your business, you are in a peak season, like, for example, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and you have an e-commerce application which is highly demanded, and you have an extra amount of workload on those specific time frames, right? What do you have to do? Is you just go to the Azure portal and scale up, right? Granting additional processing power, memory, and even disk, right, to handle that peak. And then when you are done with that, you can even scale down in no time, right? So again, coming from the old school, the whole scalability thing was a big deal, right? And now, with all the benefit of Azure, you can do it in few clicks, right? Of course, it has its cost to scale up, right? But again, you can do it, and if you need it, is immediately, right? So you don't have to wait to verify your hardware and all the things that I mentioned before. Advanced security, as long as all the security features coming in SQL Server, right, which is the less vulnerable relational database in the market, you have all the security across Azure, right? Another important thing is versionless, right? This is quite interesting as well, because we're coming from the old world, right? We have SQL Server versions since I started with SQL Server 6.5. Now we have SQL 2022, several versions in between. So every time Microsoft releases a new SQL Server version, right, we have to get our application, the databases, validated that it works perfectly with the new SQL Server version, and then configure and set up the migration in place or side by side, right? And that takes times and effort and resources, right? So Azure SQL Database and Managed Instance have this concept of versionless, right? What is versionless? No version, right? So doesn't matter if it is today or if it is in 10 years, there is no version, right? So Microsoft guarantee you that you won't go through the pain of this upgrade process, right? Because it's always the same version. Does it mean that being the same version has no innovation, no new features, no nothing? Absolutely not. It's the other way around, right? You can enable and disable and even test those features in advance, right? Without losing any innovation, but without going through the pain of going through different SQL Server versions. Really, really nice and interesting, right? Built-in monitoring and built-in intelligence. This is all the features coming with the latest and the modern version of SQL servers, like query store, automatic query tuning, and all those features, all available in all the flavors of Azure SQL, right? So when you deploy a virtual machine in Azure, it's quite interesting because you have to select few things in a wizard, right, that we will see in a minute, right? And as you know, SQL Server since 2017, it runs in a Linux platform, right? So you have to choose the SQL, first of all, the OS, if it is Windows or if it is Linux, then the SQL Server version and edition, right? You can go since SQL Server 2012, I believe nowadays, right? Running in Windows Server 2012 up to Windows Server 2022 running SQL Server 2022. And you can choose your edition, right? You have an extensive list of images that you can go and select, right? Then you have to select the CPU, the memory, the local drives, and few other things that we will see together in a minute, right? But why are these virtual machines so nice? Well, one more time, coming from experience and from the old days, installing a SQL Server was something that seems very simple, right? But it has a lot of caveats, right? When you install SQL Server, you just go to the installer and go next, finish. Boom, it's there, right? You put your user databases, everything looks great, but in a matter of a week or something, everything starts working very slow, right? And that is because it was not configured properly, right? There are a bunch of best practices around SQL Server on how to configure, right? Where to put the data file, the logs file, the 10 dB, the size of the 10 dB, the degree of parallelism, and few other things, right? If you go through all this configuration from the wizard, right, most of those best practices will be applied to your virtual machine while you do the deployment. So now it's not like before that you do the initial installation and then you have to reconfigure few things to follow the best practices that in some cases, right, DBAs forget about it, right? So now you have everything within this deployment. So super, super nice, right? And then for managed instance, you have this concept of service tier. What is service tier? Well, basically there are two, like options. One of them is the service tier called general purpose, that according to Microsoft, most of the business workloads run just fine, right? And then you have an additional tier which is called business critical. Someone has listen also. I started listening to music. I'm listening to music here. I don't know
I can
if
hear
it's
you.
coming from.
Yeah, I can
Anyway.
hear you.
Oh, okay. It's gone. So I thought it was coming from there. So anyway, general purpose for most of the business workload, and business critical if you require lower latency, right, and fast recovery and additional readable secondaries, you can choose business critical, right? Both of these service tiers, right, are based on the virtual core model, vCore model, right, in where you select the amount of virtual cores that you need for your setup, right? So you will choose general purpose in where you choose the virtual cores, and then the storage, right? And the local storage is for business critical. So lower latency, accomplish it with local storage, right? Then, if you go to Azure SQL Database, right, initially it was created with this concept of DTU model, Database Transaction Unit, right? So you used to, provision your Azure SQL Database with the amount of DTUs. So more DTUs, more storage and compute, but you were not in control of the CPUs and the storage behind the thing, right? Now it's also the vCore model for Azure SQL DB as well, right? Which is the one that Microsoft recommends. The DTU model is still available, right? But Microsoft recommends vCore model. Also, within Azure SQL Database, you have tiers, right? General purpose, same as managed instance. Business critical, right, with lower latency, right? And there is an additional one called hyperscale, right? This is basically to have, let's say, endless storage, right? And additional read-only capability. Right? So this is a combination of local and remote storage. Right? So now that we know the virtual machine, Azure SQL Managed Instance, and Azure SQL DB, how we can connect to it? Well, same as usual, right? First of all, we're going to do the deployment through the Azure portal, right? Then we can use either Microsoft Management Studio, Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, Azure SQL Data Studio, right? Or any interface that we need to, right? SQL CMD, PowerShell, etc., etc., etc. So same as we've been using with SQL Server. Mm-hmm. It's something important to consider is that, Azure SQL is only the database engine, right? And if you are using another component of SQL Server like integration services, reporting services, or analysis services, right? There are other options within Azure, but it's not Azure SQL, right? So if you are using SSIS, SQL Server Integration Services, right? You have to find out the Azure Data Factory, right? Which will allow you to do those data workflows, like ETLs, for example, to do data movement and transformation, but you don't have SSIS anymore. Reporting services, well, Power BI will be your option. And for analysis services, you have two options, right? If you are deploying a tabular model, right, you can use Azure Analysis Services. What is Azure Analysis Services? Well, same as Managed Instance for SQL Server, but for analysis services. You just will deploy the Azure Analysis Services. You will deploy your cubes over there. You won't handle the infrastructure behind the scenes. You only connect to the service, right? And finally, if you are still using multidimensional models, well, you have to rely on a virtual machine installing SQL Server analysis services and choose the multidimensional option, right? Also, if you still want to use integration services, you can deploy a virtual machine and install reporting services if you want to, right? So now, if we want to do a migration from either on-premise to Azure or, from a virtual machine running SQL Server to any of the other past options, Azure SQL DB or Managed Instance, we have several tools and services, right? Azure Migrate, Azure SQL Migration Extension, and Azure CLI and PowerShell, right? In all these cases, what it is helping you, right? First of all, they are free. What they are helping you to do is basically to assess your existing databases, see what you may need eventually to migrate to your destination, right? So you have to choose your source and the destination. Destination could be the one that you want to move to, right? For example, I have a SQL Server on a virtual machine and I would like to move to Azure SQL Managed Instance. It will assess all your databases, all your code, and it will tell you if you eventually need to make some changes, right, to your infrastructure, to your code, in order to move it to Azure. And it will also help you with the proper migration, right, which can be either online migration or offline. What does it mean, right? Offline migration is when you have the benefit of maybe stopping your application for X amount of hours. So you stop your source, you take your backups, you move your backups to the cloud, and then you put over there. That is the offline migration. But then there are certain scenarios in where you don't have that luxury of having hours to do the downtime, and you just have few minutes, right? Those are the online migration in where you or these options will help you to synchronize your source with your destination. And when it's ready, when it's fully synchronized, you just do the cutoff, you change the connection string, and boom, you are ready to roll, right? So for that, you have within Azure Data Studio, right? This Azure Data Studio is like Management Studio, but a little bit different and modern, right? You have this concept of extensions, so you can download the Azure the Azure SQL Migration extension, which is totally free, right? That will help you to do the assessment and to accomplish the migration right away, right? So it's super easy, and eventually will help you to do the migration with minimal downtime. Mm-hmm. Another benefit of being within Azure SQL is that you're gonna be integrated with Azure and other services. For example, if you have an architecture that have multiple Azure components, like for example Azure Databricks or Power BI, Azure Functions, Synapse Analytics, machine learning, or anything, you can have your Azure SQL as part of that architecture, right? So definitely super powerful in that sense, right? So every single component of Azure SQL is being upgraded, migrated, and with new features month after month. Right here in the slide, I have few examples of features coming through all the services, managed instance, virtual machines, and Azure SQL Database. So constantly there are new features and enhancements to make it even more powerful, right? Now, most of the thing in the AI era, right? We also have Azure SQL Copilot within the option, right? What can we do with Azure SQL Copilot, which, by the way, is currently in preview, right? You may have two flavors of Copilot. One of them that will help you with prompts like, why my database is slow, or what can I do to improve my code, or those kind of things. And Copilot will analyze the health of your Azure SQL database, only available in Azure SQL Database, right? Not in virtual machine, not in managed instance, and will come up to you with recommendations to improve and solve those specific problems, right? And the other flavor of Azure SQL Copilot is that also available in Azure SQL DB is that you will be able, or Copilot will be able to understand the data model, the relationship of your current user database, right? And you will be able to have prompts like, for example, give me the top 3 vendors in the last month, or which were the fast-selling product within the last 6 months, right? So what Copilot will do, it will go through your data model, it will prepare the query, the T-SQL, Transact SQL query, right? It will present it to you. You will have to analyze it and approve it. And when you are happy, or if you are happy with that specific, query, you can run it directly, right? So instead of you writing the joins and the cross applies and everything in the query, you just get your prompt and you enter what you need to Azure SQL Copilot, and you get what you need. Super, super powerful. Right here, there are some links with more information about Copilot, right? I'm not sure if there are any questions till now, but we are ready to get into the demo, right? So feel free to stop me at any time if there are questions, but I would like to show you Azure SQL in action. So
Javier, there's no questions that come in at the moment anyway, so you work away in your demo.
Okay, very good. Let's jump into the demo then.
Thank you.
Let me pull up my other screen. So here we go. I have my Azure portal here, and I have the option of Azure SQL, right? So when I go to Azure SQL, I can see all the existing Azure SQL components that I have deployed, but I can also go up here and do create, right? If I go hit create, I have the 3 options that we saw before: Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Managed Instance, and SQL Virtual Machines, right? If I go to SQL Virtual Machines and expand in here, I see all the available offerings that we have. At the top, I have the latest and greatest SQL Server 2022 running on Windows Server 2022, and we go through the different editions, right? Enterprise, Standard, Web, etc. We also have SQL Server 2022 running on Red Hat, Linux 8, Ubuntu 20, or Ubuntu or Red Hat, as I said, right? Then we go down and we have SQL 2019. And if we go further down, we can even go to SQL Server 2012, right? Hopefully nobody's using anything in production with 2012 because it's out of support. But if you go into a virtual machine, you may have some benefit of doing so. But again, soon SQL Server 2014 will be out of support, so definitely we need to start focusing on migrating to newer version. Right? So just to start with, let's go to SQL Server 2022 on Windows Server 2022 Developer Edition. Right? So we hit create, and what we will see here is an experience which is quite similar to for the other options as well. So and also we have this is actually new. The Copilot to help me to create the virtual machine. I haven't seen it before, so let's see if I can. No. So I have to choose the Azure subscription, the resource group. I will create a brand new resource group, and I will call it Archie Javier. Then we have to specify the virtual machine name, right? I put a virtual machine, put 5, the region, and a few other things. Machine in Azure. You lost the connection.
Yeah, Javier, sorry, we just lost your connection there. Your audio dropped as well. Might be a Wi-Fi.
Okay, it's coming back. It's coming back.
Come back now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. So here I have the option that I select, SQL Server 2022 Developer Edition, right? And here, I have size. And when I go size, if I go see all sizes, right, we will see that the virtual machines are classified within families, right? You see here we have the different names, B, D. We will see that there are E, there are M, right? And each one has let's say, a specific purpose. Type is general purpose. Then if we go further down, we have the E series, which are for memory intense workload. We even have the M series down there, which are machines with up to 400 virtual cores and 11 terabyte of memory, right? So here we can choose the amount of virtual core, the amount of memory, the data disk, maximum IOPS, storage, and here we have a cost. The cost is expressed in Argentinian pesos in here, and it's an estimate of your of the cost that you have to pay on a monthly basis, right? And you have the D series, version 4, version 5. The difference between each other is, for example, that the version 5s have better or newer CPU models, right? Same for the E series, right? The D and the E series are the ones that are recommended by Microsoft for SQL Server workload, right? And depending on your need, you will choose one or the other, right? And as I said before, you can eventually change the virtual machine size on the fly. It's going to require that reboot, right? But you can scale. If you right now we're going to choose 2 CPUs and 8 GB of memory. Eventually, we can choose it to go to 16 CPUs and 32 gigs of memory for a certain amount of time, etc. Right? So then we're gonna specify a username and password. This is the RDP for to connect to the virtual machine. You have to put it and repeat it, right? If you want to open the port for remote desktop, right? Licensing, let's say that I'm bringing my own license here. Then I go next and will choose the disk. This is the local drive for the OS, right? So then I go to networking. If I have an existing network deployed in Azure, I can use that one, right? I can also create a public IP to connect to my virtual machine. Then the management part, right? We can even, if this is, for example, a virtual machine that will be used for tests or development, we can even enable the auto shutdown. So every day at 7 p.m. UTC, the VM will be shut down. This will help us to save some money. Right? We won't be paying for the compute. We will need to pay the storage, right? But not for the compute. Right? What else? Monitoring, if we want to enable additional monitoring options, then advanced, if we want to bring our own disk, etc. And then finally, SQL Server settings, right? Here we have, the port, right? We will be using the standard port for SQL Server 1433. If we want to enable SQL authentication, by default, we'll take the same account that we put before. Data disk, right? So we can even add faster disk, more disk, different disk type, etc., right? The max DOP, we can change the max DOP here, the collation, the memory limit, right? What else? We can enable the auto backup for the virtual machine, right? So what I said before, to configure the whole thing. And then when we are done, we can specify some tags for management. We do the final review, right? What it will be doing here, basically do a cross-check if everything is, well. Apparently, I have some problem with the SQL settings. Let's see which is my problem here. I enable automate account and I haven't selected the storage account, so I will disable it. I go back here, review again. It will review the whole thing. Not a problem here in Basis. What is that? I have to confirm that I have the license. Final review, right? So running the final validation pass is going to give me an estimate of the cost, right? And a summary of the configuration. And when we are ready, right, we just hit create and will be created for us and deployed. Let's say that we have to create like 10 of these virtual machines the same time, right? We can eventually come back down here to download template for automation, right? And what this will do for us, it will download a file that then we can use from command line or the Azure command line, and use that template just to create multiple virtual machines instead of going one by one through the wizard, right? When we're done here, we just go and hit create. In this case, I won't do it because I already have one that I will show you in a minute, right? So let's go back here to create. And what I will do here is I will create a managed instance, right? So I hit create. Similar as before, the interface is quite similar. We're gonna choose the resource group. We have to specify the name, right? Let me see. Okay, I just have that the name is already in use, right? So it's checking if you already have a managed instance with the same name. So I will go with the number 4, right? We go to compute and storage. So when we go here, right, we have multiple options. The tier, right, as I said earlier, right, we have general purpose or business critical, right? Let's go with general purpose. Then it's this option now, which is in preview, which is next generation general purpose preview, right? That will give us with additional options and capability. Let's enable it for now. And then we have to choose the amount of virtual core, the storage, and the IOPS for my disk, right? As you can see here, you cannot choose the amount of memory for your virtual machine. You can choose the number of virtual cores. So in the hardware generation, here at the top, you have 3 options: standard series, premium series, and premium series memory optimized, right? And it's telling you which processor it's going to be using. At the same time, it's giving you a ratio, right, of the amount of memory per virtual core that you will use. So for example, if we go with the standard series, you will have a rate of 5.1 gigabyte per virtual core. So if we choose 4 virtual cores, we will have 20.4 GB of memory. If instead we choose premium series, we're going to have 7 gigabytes per virtual core. And if we go to memory optimized series, we're going to have a ratio of 13.6 gigabyte of RAM, right? So then we can put the number of gigabyte per storage. As you can see here, we don't have to select the data drive, the disk drive, the 10 DB drive, nothing like that. We just check the amount of storage, total storage for my managed instance, right? What else? For the backups, which kind of backup, how we want to put the redundancy, etc. Right? What else? I will specify SQL authentication here to make it easier. What else? We go next to networking. It will set up the network for us. We can enable a public endpoint if we want, the minimum version of TLS. Security, not much here. We can, if we use a transparent data encryption, we can bring our own key over there. Additional settings, we can select the collation for our managed instance. We can select the time zone, right? Let's say I will choose the one for Buenos Aires, right? What else? And here you have something quite interesting, which is also new. SQL engines updates, right? So, and you have 2 options: always up to date or SQL 2022, right? If you want to use SQL 2022, right, the benefit is that you will be able to take a backup of SQL Server 2022 and restore it to managed instance, right? But also you can take a backup of your managed instance database and restore it back to a SQL Server 2022, right? If you use the always up-to-date version, you can take a backup of your existing database on premise, right? And you can restore it to the managed instance always up to date, but then you won't be able to take a backup and put it back, because again, the always up to date will be bringing all the new benefit and features, right? So you cannot put it in your SQL Server. So I will leave it in SQL Server 2022. So finally, we do tags again for administrative purposes. Review and create. We'll do the validation. We'll give you a cost, an estimate cost with the summary. Here's something quite interesting to know, right? It's telling you that deploying a managed instance is a long-running operation, and it could take up to 6 hours to complete, right? So be patient when you create it, right? Of course, I won't create it right now because I don't have the 5 hours. So wait a second, I don't know. Oh, I lost my connectivity again. 1 minute. Connection is not very good today. Still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
I think I'm back. Am I back? Yes, I think I'm back. So I won't hit create here. I'm going back to my Azure SQL, and I will show you once you have it created. Here I have my virtual machine, right? You have, everything that you need in order to monitor your virtual machines. Is quite interesting because, you have everything from here. I think my connection is not so stable right now.
I can see it. It's fine.
Okay, here we go. Oh, it's just asking me for a survey in the middle of it. Nice. So if I go to overview, for example, I can see the disk, a few other things, backups. I can even run a best practice assessment here, right? So everything that I need for my SQL Server. I can even reconfigure here the edition. I can, improve my storage, see the latency of my disk, right? Apply the patchings, take the backups or reconfigure the backups, etc., etc. If I go to my managed instance, again, I can do the same. Go to overview, see everything, right? In this case, I don't have any database deployed to this managed instance, but I have all I need from here. And finally, I have my management studio here, and I am connected to the three options. I am connected to a virtual machine running SQL Server 2022. I am connected to an Azure SQL Database, right, here. And also, I'm connected to a managed instance. So from my application, right, in this case, Management Studio, I can do anything I need. I can do a deployment, I can do monitor, I can, create store procedures, everything I need to my three options within Azure SQL, right? So going back to the slide and just finishing as a summary, right? Azure SQL has evolved into the world's better database or relational engine. Azure SQL includes virtual machine, managed instance, and databases. SQL Server running on virtual machine is best for 100% lift and shift. Right? Azure SQL Managed Instance can give you all the power of SQL Server plus the power of Platform as a Service. And Azure SQL Database is intended for modern cloud application, also providing you the power of Platform as a Service. And with that, we just finished the presentation, introduction to Azure SQL. I hope you liked it and you had an idea of what can be done with Azure SQL as a whole. Right?
So thanks, Javier. So we have one question. I'm just put it up on the screen for you. I don't know if you can see it. I'll read it out. It's from John. At what point does it become notably better to be on Azure SQL than a SQL Server hosted instance on a conventional server?
Okay. Conventional server could be an on-premise hardware that you have in your own infrastructure, right? This is what I may understand by conventional server, unless it is running on a SQL Server virtual machine. So I give you two answers, right? From your SQL Server on-premise into your any options or Azure SQL, right? I would say that, again, you don't have to worry about your infrastructure. You don't have to worry, well, not infrastructure. Let's say if you are still dealing with a SQL Server on-premise, you have to handle your data center, your high availability, your disaster recovery. So if you have an on-premise environment, you may have to have another data center, hopefully not, a few meters away of your, existing one, but few kilometers / miles a way in order to solve a disaster recovery solution, and you have to maintain the hardware, the security, everything as you do it right now. And that is costly, and this is quite complex. Is it impossible? No, we've been doing that forever, right? But in Azure, you have these options within few clicks. And the whole scalability thing, as I said, is a big, big, big deal. It was always hard to dimension your SQL Server for an application, because you have your boss that come to you saying, hey, listen, the development team has this brand new application, and we need a server for that. Okay, how many CPUs, how many gigabyte of memory, which disk? I don't know, right? So you have to get a guess, and maybe you downsize or oversize your virtual machine or your server. Right? In Azure, you can do that super simple, right? Then, if you are in Azure and you want to move from one tier to another, I will give you my recommendation on how I will approach a migration to Azure SQL. First of all, the easiest thing to do is to migrate my existing on-premise SQL Server to a virtual machine, right? Maybe to the same version of SQL Server, maybe to a newer one, right? But that is 100% lift and shift. So you don't have to worry about many of the compatibility issues that you may have within your application. Maybe you may need to do some adjustment to your connectivity and those kind of things. But you know that your databases will run exactly the same in the virtual machine. The moment that you have your application running on the virtual machine over there is when I start thinking of moving to managed instance, right? If you have a legacy application, excuse me, if you have a legacy application, I would say that it's not ideal to move to Azure SQL DB and to manage instance, right? So you will have SQL Server with the power of platform as a service. But if you come nowadays, your boss and tell you, we come with a new project and we have to create this new application, I will tell them, start by looking Azure SQL DB from day one, right? That will be my suggestion. Hope the question is answered.
That's a really good perspective. I think hopefully, John, that's answered your question. So, folks, we're just up on time. There's no more questions coming in from what I can see. And Javier, thank you very much. That was a really
thanks
cool.
a lot.
It was better than just an introduction, right? It was an introduction.
It was quick, but I tried to cover as much as possible in such a small thing.
Exactly. So it was excellent. And then Björn, thank you very much as well. It was really, really great. Like, I think we had two great speakers and presentations on tonight. So folks, for anybody else,
really good.
Yeah, for anyone else who has any questions, drop them into the chat. We'll get them out. The guys have shared their socials already, but we'll make sure that you get an answer for them if there's something that you missed. So,
all right, very good.
I think we're just so much out there, guys.
Yeah, thanks. So let me join. Okay.
Perfect.
Let me quickly play a video just to end it. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.